Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissland. Joining me, as always, Garrett Silan. How's it going, man?
Ben, you, me, and everyone else listening is going to say a very small prayer. Okay. I am in the middle of the mountains, a very beautiful scenic lake view right now. But that also means that the internet is very poor. Not only that, but I have my friends who could come back at any time from lunch. So really, we are playing with fire here. But I appreciate you being flexible today, and we're going to do fingers crossed that this works out.
Absolutely, yeah. Excited to talk today. Obviously, coming off of regional championships, it's one of those. This weekend's always one that makes me feel a little old because I'm remembering how many years ago that I was racing at this meet, and I'm like, man, it's already been 3 years. It's been a long time, but I think it's one of our favorite weekends. There's so many races, so many good performances. You really get to see the best of the best come out and run really well. So we're excited to jump in. We aren't excited though to see the lack of ratings and reviews that we have accumulated on Spotify and Apple. Back-to-back zeros in the last 2 weeks for both Apple and Spotify. So hey, we're getting into nationals. We're gonna have a great national meet. We're gonna have a great recap of it. Already gonna tell you that. Just go ahead, put that rating review right now.
That'd be great. Thank you. Put it in. Also, by the way, 3 years. I remember doing that podcast
I
with
know.
you. Man, that's so long ago. It feels like that was like a year or two ago. Like 3 years. Ooh, getting
There's
old.
there's a wedding and two babies in between that for me.
Oh
It's
my
been a
gosh. And I love how all of
wild three
that's for
years.
you and none of that's for me. So between that, you've made the regional meet, gotten married, had two kids. It's like, Garrett, what have you done? It's like, well, I got a coffee this morning, and then that's my big development. So all right. Anyways, let's jump right into it. Yes, ratings and reviews. That would be great. Where do you want to start first?
Let's start in the men's 800, and we'll try to just move our way through the different events, and we'll hit on men's and women's side. We'll kind of try to track any big developments, maybe any big performances, maybe some men or women that aren't going to be at the national meet that we expected. So let's start with the men's 800, and really, I think one of the biggest stories was the East performances. You had a bunch of guys, 5 men run 145. And really, it wasn't I mean, a lot of them you could have kind of expected, but there was some mixed in there that were a little bit surprising. You had like Shane Cohen of Virginia running 145.3. Reiner Swainpool looking great, running a PR of 145.2. And then Usama El Bouchabe, like coming back and looking like he's peaking at a very good time. Of course, he was fourth in his heat, but he still ran 145.6. There were a lot of interesting performances in the East, and it just makes the 800 look so much deeper than I feel like we foresaw coming into this weekend.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because it's such a stark contrast to what last year was. The East Region 800, no one ran under 149, right? And so you're like, well, even if it is faster, surely it can't be like dramatically faster, right? Even if it's better conditions and people are still pushing. To have five guys go 145, like it's big individually for a lot of these guys. For
Mm-hmm.
Swainpool, it validates, that he really is the real deal. Shane Cohen, the progression that we have seen from him, his ability to peak, he is becoming a major problem for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different half milers out there. Tyrese Roden validates his recent 145 ACC win. Trying to Usama El Chebe gets back on, onto the top tier of his form. And Camden Marshall of Indiana
Mm-hmm.
runs 145, had never run under 146 before. I think we both really liked his talent, but we were
Yep.
still waiting for like, can you get to that next level? And this indicates that he can, and that he can at least be an All American. I think the ceiling for a lot of these guys, and frankly, you kind of go down the list. How many guys in the finals of that East region? I think it was 15 men ran 146 or faster. So
Yep.
wild East region 800-meter developments there. And I think the ceiling for a lot of these guys in terms of the All American contender status raised significantly.
Absolutely, and kind of as I was looking through these regional results, and I'm not sure, and as I was watching races, and I'm not sure if this is kind of how you do things, but I'm trying to go through and be like, all right, what did I see this week from someone that made me like improve their stock in my mind, or maybe one of the favorites who didn't look great, and I'm maybe a little more concerned about them going into the national meet. For someone who I think just keeps improving his stock is someone you just mentioned, Therese Roden, like winning his heat. It was, I mean, he had some pretty good guys in there, and he just won comfortably. Like it was, he just continues to look so under control and so prepared to run whatever kind of race he needs to run at nationals. And I'm starting to kind of put him near that top tier because he just keeps putting in these great consistent performances.
Yeah, this is definitely the best I think he's ever looked in the postseason for sure, in terms of consistency, ability to execute. It just seems like he's just a little more. I don't say sure of himself. I think he's always kind of been sure of himself, but I think there's just a little bit more a measured approach, even if it's
Sure.
still some aggressive front running. So I really liked what I saw from him across the board, and Yukichi Ishii, Penn State ran 146. Nice PR for him. Will Cuthbertson and Luke Reiner, of Butler and Army respectively, they get into the 146 range after, kind of knocking on that door a little bit. And man, Georgetown just got absolutely robbed in that East region. Gabriel Angiano runs 146. The freshman, who I believe is from Italy, runs 146. But Tim McKierney and Tenoda Matsada, 13th, 14th place, each running 146. That is crushing. That stinks because I believe Tim McKierney is probably is a top 12 guy in the East region. I do. I think what he's done throughout this year, his stability and reliability, and for him to have like a big PR and still come through, and yet he's the first man out. That was a tough one to stomach for sure.
Absolutely. And out west, I mean, Busy Mana, I think was another one that you just feel that much more at ease with after his performance. Rivaldo Marshall was kind of just hanging on for dear life a little bit there at the end, which was making me a little bit nervous. He hasn't looked quite at his best. But you run through the rest of this group out west. I don't think there was too many surprises. A lot of the top favorites that we expected ran well. Andrew Casey, I think, is probably the big name, who had a really nice PR performance, the freshman from Wisconsin, snagging one of those small Qs, finishing fourth in his heat, running 147.4. But anything else on the men's 800 side?
Cole Lindhorst, thought that was
Yeah.
a really nice PR, sub 147 for the first time. I like him a lot. Not sure how that will translate, but did think that was worth noting.
Yeah, he looked. I think having Busy Mana in his heat made
Yeah, that helped.
him
Yeah.
look. He just looked so much more comfortable. He knew he was just all
Mhm.
right. I'm gonna run right behind him, and I don't have to worry about too much here. So he hung on well after a fast start and got one of those qualifying positions. But let's move on to the women's side, and I think one, or basically the one big takeaway I had here is the Stanford women look like they're back to their best. Like Roisin Willis, 201 to win her heat. Juliet Whitaker basically just dominating her heat, as well, running 201 as well. I thought they looked great, but I guess the biggest story though is Gladys Chepnegetich, sub 2 for the first time, 159.8, looked incredibly strong and looks like the most surprised person in the world that she had just run sub 2. She was ecstatic, like walked straight off the track, was like, I could not believe it. Happy to see her get that performance. And she's on a roll right now. You talk about her teammate Therese Roden. She's on a roll just as much as he is.
Who are you more scared of on the national stage, Roden or Chepngetich?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think Chepnegetich at this point, and
I think so
I
too.
say that after saying Roden like is getting close to my top tier, but
Yeah.
she, I mean, has proven that she can run sub 2. She's been very competitive in basically every race she's been in. She has been consistent. She can run multiple types of races. Like there really is. If Michaela Rose didn't exist, you could make a pretty compelling argument that she could be one of the top favorites.
Yeah, I don't think she's a title contender quite yet. I think it's kind of in the same way of Sanu Jallo of like,
Right. Yep.
we need you to be at this level more consistently. But Chepnegetich has been great this spring. She's run two flat. She ran 4:13 for silver over 1,500 meters at the ACC championships, double back a couple hours later to win the ACC title over top half milers who were fresher. And man, it is really hard to dislike her talent. I think at the very least, she's shown that her ceiling now raises high enough to the point where it's like she probably is now considered an All American favorite rather than just an All American contender, which I don't think is something that we could convincingly say the last time we had prior to the ACC championships.
Absolutely, yeah. I think she certainly deserves that tag of All American favorite, and I just think she has one of the higher ceilings in this field outside of that top trio, and I think she proved that this weekend. A couple other names that I liked what I saw: Sophia Gorian looks like she's kind of hitting her top form at the perfect time. Ran two
Yep.
flat, was second to Michaela Rose. I think that her ability to stay within like a second and a half of Rose, I think should give her a lot of confidence going into the national meet, knowing that she can run that type of race and still run well. And then you mentioned Sanu Jallo. A 203 isn't the most exciting thing, but she won her heat and against some good competition and looked overall under control. I liked what we saw from her. I would have liked to seen like a 202 or maybe a 201, but I think this was a solid run for her coming off of her massive improvement at SECs.
And just a few underdogs who kind of came through. I thought Joanna Archer of Grand Canyon, she qualified a little Q. In the East region, you had Smila Colby of North Florida, 202 P. No, that's not a PR for her. 202 little Q, and Nor Hagen of St. John's, 202 PR. Little Q as well. You know, these are kind of underdogs. These are kind of women who
Mhm.
you weren't really expecting them. You know, you kind of look at the West region. You had Samantha Freiborg was out, Brooke Jaworski, Ellen Nelson, Ali Buchan Nosbick. Sorry if I'm butchering that. Rose Pittman did not advance. You know, there were some decent names where I'm not saying it was impossible for Archer to get out. And you know, in the East region, you know, Bronwyn Patterson didn't advance, Charlotte Tompkinson didn't advance, Micah Trusty, a few others. Star Price was a DNF. You know, you kind of look at some of these names. These were a lot of these women had to have significant days. And it's funny. One of my buddies who I'm hanging out with this weekend, he went to St. John's and he goes, "Hey, I saw that Nora girl. Like, do you think she's good?" I was like, "Oh, well, she's definitely good. Don't get me wrong, but I don't see her making the national meet." And there we
Yeah.
are sitting at dinner, and I have the live results up, and I go, "Well, I'll be damned." You know, she did. She made it to the national meet. So um, a few underdogs came through big here.
Yeah, and we've talked over and over again about how deep the women's 800 field has been, and you had to bring your A game, or else you were not going to make it. Like there was just
Correct.
so many women that were in line to be able to snag one of those spots. So for those that weren't expected to make it, it's all the more impressive in this women's 800 field. Anything else before we move to the 15?
Let's move.
All right, let's go to the 1500 meter. And I think one of the big stories here was Fouad Messaoudi, after looking pretty strong during prelims, records a DNF, steps off with what is like 150, it looked like.
I
I mean,
guess 200 to
it
150.
was, you could just barely see it like out of camera, him step off after being in the lead for a while. He does not finish, which was a big name to not make the meet. But you look at the rest of that West 1500-meter field, this was just a brutal like to get through. Jackson Sharp
Yeah.
just missing out. Um, he comes back and runs well on the 5K, but he just missed out. Isaac Baston barely making it in, and the kind of Oregon push that we were hoping for, just some signs of life from the men's program. I think we kind of saw it this weekend. Three men making the national meet in the 1500. Elliot Cook, no surprise there, but Reinhard Harrison and Thomas Palfrey both making it in. They both looked very. I mean, Palfrey was the last one in and just edged Sharp. by 0.03 in separate heats, but just narrowly got that last spot. And then Reinhard Harrison just looked really good and smooth in his heat. What do you make of the Oregon getting these three guys in?
Um, I think it's encouraging, not just because they ran well or whatever, but these are younger guys,
Yep.
specifically Harrison and Palfrey. I mean, you try to execute on what is, like you said, this is a really brutal set of heats here. Like, I'm shocked actually that there wasn't more carnage. I
Yeah.
thought that we would see even more guys when you kind of have this kind of dynamic of the fields. I was surprised that more top names didn't falter. Um, and like the heats were not stacked in favor of Oregon at all.
No.
They were actually very much against them. So if I'm Oregon, I'm extremely encouraged. I think you could argue that among the West Region distance events, for at least for the men's side, that Oregon and maybe Montana State and the steeplechase were the big winners of the weekend. I mean, this was extremely encouraging, not just from a run well standpoint, but run well tactically when the odds are stacked against you standpoint. Um, Isaac Bastion, dude, like he is the king of heart attacks. He texted me and he was upset about himself. I was like, you stop putting yourself in these situations, dude. Like you're killing me here, man. Like because he crosses the line. I'm like, he's out. He's out. There's no and look, I mean, he made it by zero point zero 0.06 seconds. Jack and Sharp was behind it by zero point zero 0.06 in a separate heat. So that could have gone very poorly. But it's almost better though that he had this now than at the national meet.
Oh, absolutely. Another one that he ended up running well and easily qualified. I didn't love the way Colin Salmon ran his race. It was like he was trying to cover every single move and just stay just a little bit and stay on the rail, stay just ahead. Just wasn't letting people pass him, which I like. Sure, he's fit enough to probably to do that. That's not going to work well at like the finals at nationals. You can't respond to every move. You're going to wear yourself out. I didn't love what I was seeing there. And again, hopefully he just gets out of the system. He talks with Coach Smith and they kind of game plan a little bit differently going into nationals, but didn't love that from him. But outside of that, I mean, Parvez Khan also kind of gave us a heart attack, narrowly making it in the East Regional. But the East Region was, I mean, there's some surprises in there, but just not nearly as deep as it felt as the West Regional.
No, yeah. I didn't have too much of an issue with Solomon because I think how you run the regional races are different than how you run the
Oh,
national
of
meet.
course, yeah.
I think there's more risk reward at the national meet for how
Mhm.
where you place in that top group. So I didn't totally mind it. I again like I didn't maybe love it, but I thought with the guys who he was going to have to deal with in that heat, it I didn't totally dislike it. Yeah, East Region, not really like a whole lot to discuss. Um, Pretty decent times, like a handful of sub
Yep.
340s. Benny Anderson, freshman from Syracuse, he was great. Like we knew he was good, but man, he's having heck of a season. 339 PR advances, really impressive stuff. I think Syracuse just kind of needs like a more long term guy to kind of lean on. But yeah, there's a few guys who I would have liked to see on the national stage. Abel Tefra was a big miss. That
Yeah.
stinks because you want to talk about someone who's actually been super consistent this season and throughout the year. He's been that guy, who was fifth at nationals in the mile. So tough loss there. But I think generally speaking, this was considering how these races played out, stunned that there weren't more losses.
Yeah, I agree. It was fairly chalk, and with how deep and how like tactical a lot of these races can go, it's rare that you don't see a few big names really miss out. But let's go to the women's side, and the thing I took away from these women's 1500 meters is, despite two women, Flamina Askal and Kimberly May, running 407 and looking great doing it, the divide between Maia Ramsden and everyone else has never felt bigger. It is like stunning that so many women could run under 410, that Eskel and May could look as good as they did in the East region. And I mean, there was some great performances out West as well, but Ramsden is just in a different class. 4:05 to easily take the win. I mean, she legitimately looks like she's gonna like run at least 4:05 at nationals, and no one's just gonna be able to touch her.
Well, I mean, we also forget she ran 4:02 at the LA
4:30, yeah,
Grand Prix
yeah,
like last
yeah,
weekend, by the way, which is insane. So this 4:05 is a jog fest for her
yeah.
comparatively, which
Wild.
is wild. And really, it's like, okay, fine. Maia Ramsden runs 4:05. Sure, I can get behind that. May and Asakal run 4:07 in the finals after running 4:07 in the prelims.
In the
Okay,
prelims.
sure. But then you look down this list, the depth is
Hmm.
unreal. Shannon Flockhart of Providence, 408. Judy Kosky of South Carolina, 408. Tegan Scheinbecker of Ryder, 408. Big, nice race for her. Melissa
Yep.
Riggins of Georgetown, 408. Lorena Rangel Beatrice of LSU, 409. Good race for her. Sam Bush of NC State, 409. Lindsey Butler of Virginia Tech, 409. Kiara Carter of Lipscomb, 409. And Suze Altorf of Florida State, 410 to cap out the top 12 there. That is unreal. I
Staggering.
mean, if I had told you if I had asked you where's going to be the fastest 1,500-meter races in the women's this year, you would have said national championships. You'd have said maybe some sound running meet that we didn't know about,
Right.
or Brian Clay. You would never have said the regional
The
meet.
East Regional.
Super odd, super odd. And then you get two sub 410s in the West region too,
Yeah.
with Sophia O'Sullivan and Julia Cherubet. Just unreal. Of those sub 410s, who's the big winner?
Ooh. There's a lot. I mean, Scheinbecker running that and qualifying, I think that's like a huge performance. We've talked about her several times. We thought she had a chance to do it, but I think Julia Cherubit, and we'll talk about her more in the 5K. She just looks like on a different level right now. I know you didn't love the decision to double, and I think
I still don't like it, by the
that
way.
might come true when we get to the national meet when that's not going to be that's gonna be maybe a little bit of more of a problem. But man, she looks dominant right now, like, and just so under control. She was definitely one of the stock up women for me after this weekend.
I'm going to go Sophie O'Sullivan of Washington in that same West region.
Yep.
She has a tibia injury that she posted about earlier this month. She's been, kind of absent on and off a little bit. Some races are better than others, but then runs 409 in the West Regional. I mean, you couldn't have picked a better time to run that
Yeah.
well. I think that's huge. And then not necessarily the biggest winner, but I also think I owe Kiara Carter of Lipscomb an apology because I said on the last podcast that I didn't understand why they chose the 1500 over the 800. For the record, still don't understand it. At least in that moment when you were making that decision, but clearly it worked out.
Yep.
So that, again, I've said this before. This is why I'm not a coach. So nice running overall.
Yeah, yeah, I was excited to see her make it as well. That takes a lot of confidence to go with the event that maybe you're not as high up in on the performance list and still come through. Anything else for these women's 1500s?
Nope.
All right, let's go to the men's steeplechase. And to my eye, I mean, the big thing that I had here is there just wasn't a whole lot of upsets. Like a lot of our basically all the top names made it through, looked pretty strong. Like you mentioned at the top, Montana State does it again. Like gets three guys to the national meet. I mean, it's honestly stunning what that program and that coaching staff has been able to do, where they just produce this isn't like a BYU or an NAU where you have all this like long history, you have a lot of access to different recruits. This is Montana State, and they are producing at a level that pretty much no one else has been in the steeplechase over the last 3 years.
And like Levi Taylor, Rob McManus, I think you and I both felt very good about
Yeah.
them advancing to the national meet. That wasn't the issue. But Owen Smith was the 43rd seed, and he
Jeez.
still gets in. And now he only had to run a 1 or 2 second PR, but that's the difference. Like, even on those opportunities, like this was a big opportunity where it wasn't crazy fast like it was
No.
last year, right? It was not crazy fast. And so it was within reach for someone like Owen Smith to kind of have a small PR and still get in. And that's exactly what happened. So big race for him. Logan Meisner, though, of Wisconsin, Oh, I feel so bad. He is the Big Ten champion, around 837. I really liked him. I would have borderline picked him as an All American.
Mhm.
And he hits this barrier and takes a hard fall. And I'm like, is he going to get up? And to his credit, he does. And to his credit, even more, he then tries to take a few strides. He's limping. He can't. He clearly sustained an injury. Wisconsin said he sustained an injury. I felt terrible. That was one name who I felt very good about advancing. That was tough. Yassine Sato ran 827 from Virginia. He's gone from 834
Yep.
to 830 to 827. Where are you right now in the Yassine Sato conversation?
I mean, it's such an interesting group this year for the steeplechase where there isn't like one or like two huge standout names. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put him in that group of like the Mountain, Abu Zuhir, um, who
Kibiego.
else am I? Yeah, Kipiego, who looked solid, not great.
Yeah.
And I kind of have, I think, Sato in that same conversation with like Shitsama as like someone else that's like right
Mm,
there
like Corrigan.
behind that group. Yeah, and Corrigan. I think those are probably the three that are in that next group.
Would
And
you put
it is
Stokes in
funny to
there?
see just sorry.
Would you put Stokes in there? I think I'd put Stokes in there.
Yeah, it probably just based off of experience, and he's seemingly rounding into form more. It's just interesting to see the discrepancy in times between the East and the West region. Normally, you see both regions really have some quick times. Um, I am nervous. I feel like we've been burned by like the hard charging ACC runner before in the steeplechase, which is like shouldn't have any bearing on how we feel about Zato. But I think that's literally the only concern I have with him at this point.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that. I always forget. We always be like, well, the ACC, and then I think they get to the national. I mean, Mountain was fourth last year in his
Yeah,
defense, but
yeah.
yeah, I have to go back and double check to see like what is our narrative. But I don't think it's very in favor of ACC on the national stage.
It's not great, unfortunately, but this seems like the year when there's been a little bit more consistency on that side, and I think they are in position to kind of overturn that narrative.
Let me double check real quick. I have the results right now. Yeah, there was the Virginia men got fourth and eighth at last year's final, and then Syracuse was last in 12th place in that final. But yeah, not a a handful of guys did not make it out. Ooh, that's not pretty. All right. Okay. Anyways, let's move off of the men's steeplechase. Let's head to the women's.
On the women's side, again, saw huge discrepancy in times from the East region to the West region. It was only Greta Karnuskate who broke 10 on the women's side, and she broke it by a lot, running 940. Dominant victory for her. Looked great. On the East side, Lemon Goal and Markusich were the class of the field once again. Thorner winning her heat. All the kind of top favorites that we had coming into this looking very strong.
I don't really have a whole lot. Like, I think there's just not really a whole lot. I think the East region, like Leonie Sauer ran 10:08 PR, get the final qualifying spot. I think you can make, Hannah Stewart in the West region, Rachel Anderson in the West region, Madison
Mhm.
Plummer in the West region. But, eh. I'm not going to lie. This is kind of like an unexciting event for the women in general.
Well, the steeplechase in general, I feel like it's just rare unless you see like a trip or someone hitting a barrier that like the favorites don't get through in a lot of cases because it's just you have to run really fast, and generally the favorites are the ones that can run really fast. This year, that wasn't quite the case in terms of like the times, but all the favorites still kind of came through. A few
Yeah, I mean, there were
surprises in the back
still
end, but
there,
yeah.
there were still a few women though who like didn't advance that I think were sub 10 names like Madison Nooner of Syracuse or um, Helena Lindsay was I think she had run like 10:01. There are still some
Yeah,
women who I think missed out, but it's just generally not an exciting event outside of like the top. So
yeah, there wasn't quite the depth I felt like in this year's field as we've seen before. All right, nothing else on the steeplechases.
nope. Nothing else.
All right, let's wrap it up and go to the men's 5K, where we saw some interesting finishes. What was your biggest takeaway out of these 5K performances?
Um, that there were no takeaways.
It's funny when I set you up for that. That's kind of what I'm saying. Of like, I don't really have anything to go on, so I'm just gonna let you start and see if I can riff off of that. BYU or not BYU, excuse me, NAU. I think Kale Grotenhuis getting in. That was a nice win for them. Again, both of us a little surprised about Kang Nyok, but I mean, validated. I think his performance, finishing 17th overall. He obviously not making it to nationals, but putting through a solid run. Um, and then, I mean, a lot of like, you look at the West region names, it's like, yeah, besides like Grotenhuis, like, yeah, this is kind of, none of these guys are surprising that they made it. They're all super talented.
So I do want to discuss real quick here. So the big talking point that we had last weekend was
Mm,
Kai Robinson doing the
sure.
5K, right? And you and I sat here being like, why, right? Now, granted, we also said, hey, listen, if someone can give us a good reason, let us know. And so on our YouTube page, actually, someone did comment this. Finley McIsaac, shout out Finn, and he made an interesting point here that I thought was actually a very good point that I had not considered. He said Robinson focusing on the 5K makes more sense when considering Olympic qualification over NCAA title chances, because if he sneaks himself into the points quota later in June against with a good performance against Young,
Yeah.
Wolf,
Yeah.
right, and you start going through this, and he goes, even Jackson Sharp, who's ranked ahead of him, which I don't think that's the case, not at least the world rankings that I saw on IAAF, so or World Athletics. So I don't know about that part, but that is actually a very interesting point, and I'm willing to admit that I might have been wrong. Maybe have been wrong.
No, that's a good point. I feel like I mentioned last week being like, there might be some kind of Olympic angle to this with him trying to compete for Australia, and yeah, that's a great point. And like, I think, I don't know how you feel, but there's a good chance that 5K is very quick at
Yeah,
nationals, depending
yeah.
on how it's run. And if he's running 13:0 something, competing against some of these guys, I think there's a good chance that he picks up a decent amount of points. And he qualified easily. He looks smooth, as did Nico Young. Out east, I thought some notable names. Rocky Hansen, kind of
Yep.
coming back and looking strong. He's obviously uh, came back after being injured at the end of the fall and starting to look like he's regaining his full form. So exciting to see that. Toby Gillen put through a good performance to finish 10th. Nicholas Benston of Princeton also getting that last qualifying spot in his heat. But outside of that, I didn't have a whole lot of other name. I mean, Carter Solomon getting DQ'd, so him. What happened there? Did you happen to see?
I did not see
Okay,
that now.
yeah, I missed that. The ruling is flagrantly impeded, so not sure what happened there. But yeah, there wasn't a ton of shockers in the 5Ks.
No, no. So, well, let's move on to the women. Let's see if there were anything more interesting there, which, I think by comparison, there might have been. Women's West region, yeah, actually, I did forget about this.
Yeah,
Maddie Elmore does not start, and
yeah,
Silan Ayyildiz barely gets in with a little cue. And I'm not trying to be like, like I told you, but like these are kind of the things where it's like if you don't have that experience and it's a championship setting, it can get really tricky. Now, not having Elmore, let's just talk about that,
yeah.
stinks. But now the women's 5K is now even way more wide open. And I think we're now maybe not quite as high on Ayyildiz as maybe we initially thought we were.
Yeah, yeah. I think the inexperienced thing from Ayyildiz, the fact that she just made it through and hopefully gained that experience should hopefully portend for better performances at nationals. And Elmore, it's like clearly she maybe she was dealing with something and just wasn't quite right, and they thought the 5K was the best bet for her. or maybe there was some kind of just last minute illness. Whatever it is, it stinks that, like you mentioned, that she's not going to be competing. Sophia Kennedy, like winning her
Hmm.
heat. What do we like? And looking very good doing it. What do we think of that about that? Like I mean, she's been kind of on the periphery a little bit, but very good performance here.
I think it's good that she's going to get the experience at nationals.
Yeah,
I think that's important, but I mean, you look at the times, like,
yeah.
for me, when I see these times, like if the times are within range of some of these runners and some of these women, and we know that they can run them, it doesn't necessarily shock me. Is it interesting to see her name at the top of these results above all those women? Yeah, but it's also the regional meet, and I don't
Yeah.
really know how much that order matters. Is it exciting for her? Yes. I'm just not exactly shocked. Was interested, found that like Peyton No didn't advance.
Yeah.
Brianna Weidler didn't advance. Nicola Jansen didn't advance. Mia Cochran didn't advance. Lucy Jinks didn't advance. Morgan
The
Noakes didn't
NAU
advance.
women
Ali
didn't
Upshaw,
advance.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Anika Rice did advance. And
Yeah.
Grayson
Right.
Larkin.
Yeah.
And Grayson Larkin. So,
Yeah,
but
she's day
yeah.
5. Goodness. Yeah.
So
And then out east again, way faster times. Maia Ramsden doubling back and running 15:29 is like ridiculous. I mean, it's wild to
that is
see
so
her just
impressive.
have that strength. Sam Bush running extremely well as in there. Margot Appleton definitely looking good in the 5K over the 15, and Asical coming back like the East 5K was basically just a bunch of women doubling back around the 1500 meters and looking really good at it.
So Hilda double qualifies, Parker double qualifies, Maya Ramsden double qualifies, Scrimger double qualifies, Bush double qualifies, Asicol double qualifies, Murphy double qualifies.
Wild.
That's pretty wild. And there might have been another name in there that I'm missing from the 10K who I'm
Yeah, I was
not.
about to say I'm gonna pull up the 10K results real quick just to see. Hartman double qualified.
That's
You
right.
mentioned.
She did
Yep.
double qualify. That's so wild. I mean, that's just like, and the wildest part is that like you kind of look at this and like you could have found arguments for, man, where else did she? Oh, that's where she scratched. Never mind. I thought Phoebe Anderson was going to do the 10K. She did not. Just wild, like really, really impressive. So, um, East region looks good, man. East region looks real good.
Yeah, I mean it's very like it's very few women going to nationals overall, just because they're all hogging like the same women are all hogging the spots, and it's because
NCAA is
they're
thrilled.
all of less plane tickets. They could not
Yeah.
be more excited. Yeah, it's just because they're all really good. Like it's very, I mean, it's reflected as we mentioned in the times versus the East versus the West. Almost all these women races significantly faster because that's just where a lot of the talent is concentrated this year. Anything else on the 5Ks?
Nope. That's it.
All right, let's go to the 10Ks on the men's side. Boy, this is congrats to everyone who made the 10K, but this is some of these lists are just at least on the east side a little underwhelming in terms of just the times and the quality of uh, depth that we're seeing. On the men's side, I think there was some interesting performances. Habtom Samuel looking really good. Again, Kale Grottenhouse of NAU along with Los Harris qualifying. A lot of uh, Oklahoma State guys in the picture as well as Arkansas guys. But man, out east, it was. I mean, Kiprop made it. Will Anthony, Alex Phillip, the guys that we've kind of expected to make it, did. I don't have a whole lot here.
No, I mean, the challenge with this is that you're like, man, Josh, in the East region, Josh Methner didn't make it, and
Yeah,
Perry
just
McKinnon
missing
was a
out.
DNF, and Scudder didn't make it, and O'Donnell didn't make it. But then you look at the top 12, and you're like, okay, well, who are we supposed to be mad about stealing someone's spot? And you can't really be mad. You like all 12 of those guys when looking at their entire regional, or their entire seasonal resumes, they're all deserving, right? Like
Mhm.
because sometimes there's men and women who kind of like sneak in
Sneak
there
in.
where it's
Yeah.
like they just had a really good regional meet and on paper they're just not as good. but these guys are all like well deserving. And frankly, it's the same thing in the West region. Like I know Evan
Yep.
Jenkins was just struggled a lot. I know Devin Hart was a DNF. Like I know Joey Noakes had a tough weekend. Luke Holmes wasn't great. Ben Perrin actually and Matthew Rickman weren't actually bad. They just didn't advance. But you look at everyone who kind of got in on the West region, I am not shocked by anyone who got in there. So it's this odd dynamic of like there are more national qualifying caliber athletes than there are spots, and that's what made it hard to reconcile some of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Out west, like you look at those names, it's 100%. There, I feel like there's a few surprises out east, like Nikodim Dvoracek of
Yeah,
EKU, a little bit of a surprise to see him in there, finishing seventh. But I mean, you always get a few surprises in there, and I don't think that it is. But you look down the rest of the list, like Florian Lepelic, no surprise, Jack Jennings, Sam Lawler, guys that you would expect to be in at least contend for one of those spots.
yeah.
But man, the 10K looks. I mean, Samuel, it looks like Habtom's to win. It
I
really
don't see
doesn't
how
look
he
like
loses.
anybody's gonna come close.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's go and wrap up with the women's 10K results here. Parker Valby looking great again. I mean, how much of an effort do you even think like that 32:43 is for her? Like, is that a
I don't
nice
know
little
because like I mean,
tempo?
I maybe because like you kind of look at those splits and it's like and just the race and she didn't really make a move until like the latter portion of the race and I just struggle to believe that there was any like serious heavy effort put into that. Is it impressive? Yeah, but I'm not exactly like shocked by almost any of the East Region 10K results. I think you could argue
Yep.
um, Purity Senga, maybe Maggie Donahue, maybe those two women. I think I was like, okay, maybe they got in
Mhm.
over Maeve Styles and Emily Covert and Fatima Alanis and maybe a few of the Tennessee women or Laura Mooney. But like, I'm not exactly like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this woman didn't get in or this woman didn't get in. Whereas on the West region, it was mostly chalk. And then it's like Danny Barrett gets in and Lucy Nagadu
Nagungu.
don't
Nagungu.
you of Wichita State gets in. Sandra Mayow of UTEP gets in the freshman. I'm like, man, those are some interesting names
Yep.
to kind of get in over some more established women who, just didn't have their best day. Ton of DNFs. Like,
Yep.
man, there's like 5 DNFs in the West region. So just a weird kind of like race overall for the women.
Yeah, I agree on the west side, and like I think you mentioned, like Purity Sanga, like she like obviously has a history of running really well
Yep.
and being one of the top women in the country. So even though she hasn't quite shown it, it's not like even stunning to see her up there. Um, a little disappointing to see Kelsey Camille
Yeah.
not make it
Yeah.
through. It was always going to be tough, but I wish we could have seen her race one more time. But she unfortunately did not qualify. But yeah, you look through like the first 10 names on the west side, and you're like, outside of Danny Barrett, you're like, yeah, this makes sense. The Oklahoma State women looked great. Taylor Rowe looks really good. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing from her.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's definitely a
Yep.
stock up going into the national meet. Yeah, and like someone like Haley Herberg or some of these other names on the women's side not quite making it, but that's regionals for you. You never even in a year that I felt like was very chalk, you're never gonna not have these kind of surprises.
Yeah, it was frustrating because like you make your predictions and when we make our predictions, me, Finn, and Mara, that was for the top 12 in each distance event that would advance, you almost have to build in
Some
surprises because you
yeah,
just have to assume that's going to happen. And yet there was enough instances where there was enough chalk where it was surprising that there weren't surprises. Like some of the 10Ks that we saw, or the 5Ks, and the steeplechase for sure. There we almost dropped my water bottle. But yeah, that I'm surprising that I caught that. That's the biggest surprise of anything. But Otherwise, no. I thought this was mostly chalk for the longer distances this past weekend.
Yeah, usually we have we have a few tweets or like a few mentions in an article about, wow, this one guy or this one woman didn't make nationals. Like, this is stunning. And there just really weren't like there were some like mild surprises that didn't, but it wasn't like you had any all-American favorites not really qualify. It was very chalk in that regard.
In the longer distances, we should say.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. Anything
I
else
think
that we
that's it.
forgot?
No. We have D2 D3 stuff coming to wrap up that season. Shout out to Connor Daly, did our social this weekend. Thought he did a very nice job, and as well for photographers. We are going to have national meet previews. 3 sentences or less. We analyze every single participant at the national meet in the distance events. We'll have our All-American picks. That'll include Ben. We'll have another podcast previewing the national meet. Go check out YouTube. We're going to have someone on site. We're going to be uploading videos straight from the national meet as well. It's an exciting time. It's a very exciting time. So otherwise, that's all I've got, Ben.
All right. Well, until next week, Garrett, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.